Hey, this is the Chapter 1 PowerPoint video help on the terminology introduced in this chapter. And it's pretty basic stuff, but I wanted to make sure that you have a good foundation in case you have never used Excel before. So first of all, Excel is a spreadsheet. Okay, so what does a spreadsheet mean? Well, it is a collection of data that's organized in a row and column format. So if you look at my image here, I have some information highlighted. So the first thing is a column, which is the vertical set of cells, right? So I have column A highlighted. Columns are identified with letters. Rows go horizontal, and they are identified with numbers. The intersection of a column and a row, which I have here as a green, is a cell. That's where you put information. You identify a cell by the column letter and the row number. So this cell that's green would be A3. Okay, so you want to get used to using that standard. The next thing is a workbook versus a worksheet. So a workbook is really the file name, right? So if you were looking in File Explorer, you would see the workbook name, which is identified up here. So this particular file or workbook is called Company A2022 Income Expenses. This would be the name that you would see if you were out searching for your file. It's also considered the name of the workbook. And like any book, you can have pages. In Excel and spreadsheets, instead of calling them pages, we call them worksheets. And so a worksheet is like a single page in a book. It's one tab in or one page in that book. So in this particular workbook, I have two worksheets, one called income and one called expense. When you build these, this will be called sheet 1, this would be sheet 2, and then you're going to rename them to make them more meaningful and easier to work with. So the tabs are the worksheets. The whole file is a workbook. So the next thing would be data types that you're going to put into these cells. So the first data type is text. It's also considered alphanumeric or string. And it really is any character, letters, numbers, spaces, special characters. You cannot perform math on this data type. So don't be fooled. For example, zip code. My zip code is 44614. Even though every character in that zip code is a number, it is not a numeric value. I am not going to add all of our zip codes together to get a total zip code, right? That makes no sense. Same thing with things like phone numbers or social security numbers. Even though they're comprised, the characters themselves are numerics, they're not letters, it's not a value. So that leads us to value. So a value is a numeric value. You can perform math on it. So if you think back to like your second grade room and you had like that number line around the room, you know, as you were learning how to subtract and borrow and all those kind of things. So a value is something that's represented on that number line. It has a numeric value, and it can have math performed on it. So it could be counts, it could be monetary, as long as it is, its intent, its purpose is numeric, then it's a value. The next two are date and time, and those are actually values also. They're just specialized. So dates are what's known in Excel as a serial value, a serial date. And what that does is it keeps track of how many days away from January 1st, 1900 is the current date, or the date that you're dealing with. And so that then puts a number. So 1/1/1900 is 1. 1/2/1900 is 2. 1/3/1900 is 3, right? And it just keeps moving up. And so whatever today is, that's a number. It's how many days away from 1/1/1900. And that serial value is what allows us to be able to do math. Take today's date minus your birth date, figure out how many days you've lived, divide it by 365.25, and it'll give you how many years you've lived. So you can do all of those kind of math type functions on a date. Even though it might say June, June, it still internally is a number. Same thing with the time. Time is a serial value that is away from midnight, right? So how many hours, minutes, seconds away from midnight. So that's what allows us to perform math on this on times. The next kind is a formula, and a formula is a mathematical equation that produces some kind of result. It can contain numbers, operators, special characters like the parentheses. One of the things about formulas, they always begin with an equal sign, and when you're referencing things in a formula, you want to make sure you use the cell address and not the contents of the formula or of the cell. And we'll talk about that as we move forward. And then the last one on here is a function, and a function is just a specialized formula. So those are built-in formulas that perform a set task. And the one that I have listed here is the sum function. And if you think back to your math, sum or summation is the addition of a series of numbers. And so equals sum, so the equal tells Excel, okay, here's coming a formula. Oop, here's a function name, a reserved word called sum. I know what I'm doing. Inside the parentheses then is the attribute. So it's A1, and then there's the colon, and I think in my mind that the colon represents the word through. So sum is saying add together the contents of cell A1 through the contents of A10. And so it's going to add those together, and it's going to put the answer in the cell that has this formula, which is a function. And if any of the data in A1, A2, A3, all the way to A10 changes, then that formula is going to automatically be updated, which is the power of Excel. So then let's go to navigating. So the first thing is, what is a cell reference? Well, that is referring to a cell or range of cells. So that would be when you have more than one cell selected within a formula or function instead of a value. So you would always reference the location, A10, BA72, instead of what currently resides in that cell, 100 or 200 or whatever. And that is because when the contents of that cell change, the formula will update because you referenced it using a cell. Second thing I want to talk about is the formula bar, and that's the toolbar at the top of Excel. So if we come over here to Excel real quick, and right here is our formula bar. So I have on this worksheet, I have two columns of numbers. And if you were to look at those numbers in column A and column B, you might think that they are the same, but they are not. So if I click on cell A1 and I look here, that's our formula bar, right? So it's actually got a 100, A2, 100, A3, 200, B1, 100, B2, 100, B3 does not have a 200 in it. It's got a formula that says, hey, take the contents of B1 and add it to the contents of B2. Put the answer here where my formula is. So the only way that you would really know that would be to look up here. So the power would be, let's say I'm going to change this to 500. This one updates in column B. If I change this to 500, it still says 200 because I just entered a 200. I didn't put a formula, right? Then I want you to look down here. If you look at my name, it almost looks like my name is in column A, column B, and column C. But in reality, it is all in column A. It's in cell A6. So if I click on A6 and I look at my formula bar, there is my entire name. So if I come over here to B6 and I type something, I type the word apple, it looks like my name got truncated. But in reality, even though I'm not seeing it here, if I click on that cell and I look at the formula bar, it shows that the entire name is still there, okay? So long story here, but just try and get used to looking at what is in this formula bar, particularly if you take over somebody else's work and you did not build that formula. You may erase something that you didn't want to because you thought that was a value and not a formula. So look at that formula bar. And then the last thing on this particular slide is the keyboard shortcuts. And these are keyboard equivalent for a software command. The whole point of it is that you don't have to keep moving your hand over to the mouse. If you learn some very commonly used keyboard shortcuts, and there's particularly ones that help you navigate. So like home on your keyboard will take you to the beginning of that row. End will take you to the end of that row where there's data. Control home will always take you to the A1 position. So those are the kind of things that you want to look at. And if you have a physical book, page 56 shows you that navigation shortcuts. If you have your ebook, it is, it is right above figure 34. All right, so cell ranges. So a range refers to the cells in the worksheet that have been selected. So there's really two, there's a contiguous and non-contiguous. So contiguous cells consist of multiple selected cells all adjacent to one another. Non-contiguous means that they are not, at least part of what you have selected is not directly adjacent to another cell. And to get that, you use the control key. So let me go back to Excel. And so if I just click and drag, and one of the things you want to pay attention to in my next movie, I'll talk about this a little more, is what your mouse looks like. See how it's right there? It's like I think it looks like the American Red Cross kind of a look. And so I can click, hold, and drag. That is contiguous cell range. They're all touching. But now what if I wanted some stuff over here? Well, if I just click over there, right, you see how it went away? But I want that selected, and let's say I want to go this way. I want to go as a row. I'm going to press and hold my control key, and it's going to let me select as long as I do that control, I can do all of these cells, right? And ranges. So now let's say I want to make those all have a yellow background. I clicked them, they all have a yellow highlighted background, even though they weren't next to each other, right? So pay attention to, selecting and using that control key to select non-adjacent cells. All right, so then worksheet view. So this is down at the bottom right. If you look, here's the little zoom slider. There's 3 buttons here. Normal view, which is where you come into Excel, and that's what's on there. page layout view, which shows your page margins, your print headers and footers, and page breaks. So this is a really nice way to see your headings and headers and footers, to go to this page layout view. And then the page break view doesn't show you the margins, the headers or footers, but it allows you to adjust the page break location. So if you wanted to break at a different point than what naturally is occurring, you could use this page break view and do it quite easily. So let me show you that in Excel. It's right down here, right? So if I click there, look, I did this page layout view, and now I have my header, footers, I can see my margin, and then if I can adjust where my page breaks occur, I can manually do that. And then I can go back to normal. So recognize those, and that is it for this particular intro chapter, chapter 1, terminology. All right, so the next thing would be is to start going through the help videos for your assignment, and in that assignment it'll talk about concepts. All right, thank you.